And this is one of the things I really, really love about the system of Profit First. When you are unfamiliar with how to run a business, which almost all of us were at the beginning of our business, and many of us still were years into our business, myself included, it's easy, especially these days in the sort of mindset culture, to think, oh, I'm not earning enough. I must have a mindset issue, instead of I'm not earning enough. My marketing is off, or I'm not tracking metrics, or I have no system.
Hello, Profit First entrepreneurs and thought leaders. I am so excited today. I have one of a special guest and a friend of mine. Her name is Ann Price Murphy, and Ann is the founder of Moxie Bookkeeping, but she's also a certified Profit First professional at the mastery level. Yes, bringing on one of my friends here. And, you guys know about Profit First as a cash management system where we prioritize profit first. Now, and in addition to being a mastery level certified Profit First professional, she is also a Xero platinum partner. So if you guys, use Xero, she is the lady to go to. She's also a QuickBooks Pro advisor as well as a certified business coach. And today we're going to talk all things Profit First for creatives. So please join me in welcoming Ann Price Murphy to the platform. Hey, Ann, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
Awesome. We're so excited to talk about this topic for creatives. And, creatives is a little bit different, right? It's a little bit different. And you're a bit of a creative. So let's talk about the creative and the challenges of finances with creatives.
Yep. So I think, most of us feel that our business is totally unique to us. No one else is like us. We've got all of these reasons and things. And actually, being a bookkeeper, I get to see that most businesses function shockingly the same. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't lean into customizing the chart of accounts, because I want it to be the first word that your brain grabs for is what that thing should be called. But when it comes to people in the creative industries, I think, again, they sort of assume that the way that creative businesses work must be somehow different than how a traditional business works. And it's really not. So it comes down to a lot of mindset stuff. Creatives are generally not conatively organized in the same way. And what I mean by that is it's not that they don't have the ability to learn that skill, but it's not something that feels easy to them, right? So, because one of the other things that I'm in love with is Kolbe, which is not just like a personality test like Myers-Briggs, but actually what are your learning style defaults, right? They call what your conative strengths are. So that if you're someone who doesn't need a lot of information and just wants to get started, which is a very creative way to go, but of course there's creatives of all types, then that if you're thinking in sort of big picture, beauty, color, little tiny boxes with little black and white numbers in them aren't very exciting. So I think a lot of people mistake I don't have an affinity for this for I'm never going to be good at this.
Oh, yeah, that's very easy to happen. You haven't been around something your whole life. And especially as you get older, I feel that, it's like learning something new. It's like, oh my goodness.
Right. Can be very humbling. But one of the things I talk about a lot with clients when we're getting started is it is just a skill, like learning to drive a car or learning a new language. And one of the reasons I love to say learning a new language is because then I can follow it up with, you don't need to be fluent. You just need to know how to get around the basics, hello, please, thank you, where's the bathroom, And so if we think about accounting as the language of numbers, again, we just need to give you a couple of phrases as you visit this area. You don't have to be fluent. We know you're never going to love digging around in spreadsheets unless you do. And so how can we give you the information, the answers that you're looking for without turning you into an accountant, without flooding you with spreadsheets and numbers and pieces of paper, and let you really stay in the creative flow or in the impact that you want your business to have?
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about Profit First. So our audience is very familiar with Profit First, right? We're very familiar with our bank accounts and funding our profit account first, our owner's pay and our tax. And then last and least is going to be operating expenses. So for creatives, does it run the same way using Profit First, or what are the differences with Profit First and creatives?
The only big thing to consider are project costs. And so this sort of materials and subcontractors can be a really big part of the way that they should be doing Profit First. And because it's sort of glossed over a little bit in Mike's book, at least, I think people don't always pick up on it in the way that they should. And so that's often the first place that I point them to, which again is really funny that I'm telling them to, look at costs as if they were an inventory-based business. And they're like, but I do creative things. And I'm like, I know, but you pay people to help you, or you invest in a lot of client-facing software, or, there's all of these things that we need to consider.
I love it. And just to define it, because that word creative, it's means so many different things to different people. Like, I'm creative accounting sometimes and tax strategy. I don't know if I should say that, but
but it is creative, right? It's problem solving. It's why I love bookkeeping, is because, and why I don't do taxes is because for me, it's the puzzle that I just love, not made up numbers, but certainly, what we're doing is trying to say, what's the answer that you need and what's the best way to get there?
Exactly. The strategy, right? That's what we're creative with. And what is the traditional creative? What profession is that? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a very wide spectrum. The reason that I say for creatives is because that's the language that most of the people bring to me. So in my mind, that's anyone who is a creative problem solver who loves to think outside of the box, even if there's something as boring as a lawyer or an accountant. But most of the people that I work with are in creative industries like graphic designers, film production, props makers, all sorts of things where they are really working with their creative and visual minds. Writers would also be in there. So I sort of let people self-define. For me, it's really around, are you willing to be a problem solver in your area or not? Because, and this is one of the things I really, really love about the system of Profit First, when you are unfamiliar with how to run a business, which almost all of us were at the beginning of our business, and many of us still were years into our business, myself included, it's easy, especially these days in the sort of mindset culture, to think, oh, I'm not earning enough, I must have a mindset issue, instead of I'm not earning enough, my marketing is off, or I'm not tracking metrics, or I have no system. And so Profit First for me, or really any good system where you can track the outcome without getting lost in the weeds, lets us focus on the right things so that we can clearly see when it actually is a mindset issue and when it's just a lack of a systems issue.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Something came to my mind as you were talking about defining creatives. You were mentioning things like movie production. And a lot of times at creatives is, they see the vision before everyone else sees it, right? They see the movie that's coming. They see the art that hasn't been formed yet. And a lot of times, before the world believes in you, you have to believe in yourself and you have to invest in yourself. And unlike a traditional company like bookkeeping or accounting or engineering, where you can put your revenue in an income account and allocate it to profit, to tax, to owner's pay. A creative may not have that money when they're first starting out, right? And so let's talk about budgeting for that. Budgeting when you don't have money yet, right? Because, when you're starting to do that movie, right, you don't have investors, but you might start putting together that clip. You might have to hire that film crew, right, in order to do that. Where does that initial seed money come from?
It can come from lots of different places. Usually it comes from the person themselves. And so this is why it's so important to pay yourself first, is because we often forget that we are the primary investors in our business as well as the primary employees. And so for any pre-revenue business, creative or not, that's the question is, during the first span of time, whether it's one day or 1 year or whatever, how much can you personally be able to invest into this business without stressing your personal finances or your personal life, right? That then becomes your quote unquote income. If you're starting up whatever a business, right? And I'm borrowing from my savings and I've got $10,000 in savings or $10 million in savings, and I know it has to last me a certain period of time during the build up, build out phase, then I would use that like a regular retainer account and drip that out slowly. And so that I'm tracking things as I go to say, am I on the right path? Which again is so different than the, follow your passion and the money will come, where someone might throw everything into their endeavor and not realize until it's too late that they were heading in the wrong direction or they were missing a piece of the information. So, I just think it's such a simple way to get around having to do constantly updatable budgets, right?
Definitely. A creative could struggle with having to do a budget, right?
I struggle with having to do a budget, right? I have a line called office supplies on my budget. I don't know how much I'm going to spend. I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff at the beginning of the year, a couple $100, and then nothing for the rest unless I have to. So having that just in OpEx frees me up to pay attention to the things that really matter, which is, am I overspending in general? Am I paying myself enough in general?
I like that. So really it's about counting the cost, setting aside that money and going, this is what my initial seed money is going to be. And really allowing that to be dripped out. I'm a big fan about budgets, but, I can understand, having met creatives, what that might be a challenge, having to do that. And maybe the answer is working with an accountant like N who can help you, right? Maintain that budget, because you don't want to start a project and not have enough money, right? And so maybe having that partner with N to help you kind of strategize how you're going to use that budget might be really important for you too. Hiring where you're weak.
Yes. And hiring someone that's a good fit. It's one of the reasons that I'm such a believer in collaboration, not competition, is, just because I'm an accountant and you're an accountant doesn't mean we're going to approach it in the same way or expect the same desired outcome, right? So if you're someone who really enjoys working in the minutia of Excel, like I'm not going to get in your way, but that's not really where I think my time is used best. So, if that's what you want to look for, I might say, I'm going to be great with you on this part, but you should really fill in this other. And I hear a lot, and you may have talked about this a number of times here already. Well, but I have you. Why do I need anyone else? And it's like, well, because I don't do everything. There's a whole team of financial people behind you that do different things, that have different areas of expertise and knowledge, and they should. And like you want a whole team of specialists behind you medically. Same thing for your business. You don't want your bookkeeper trying to, file taxes for you if they aren't a tax specialist, if they're not up to date on those ever-changing things. Same thing, if you have a CPA, they may not be the best person to do your bookkeeping unless they've got a whole separate department, because most CPAs, and we know that profit first CPAs are not typical CPAs, most CPAs paint with a broad brush. As long as the totals are correct, it's correct. Whereas bookkeepers are much more like, no, this is $1 off. I have to go find it and fix it right now.
We need people to find that $1, right? That's important. Again, because $1 do add up. Now, and, one of the things that I would imagine that as a creative would struggle with is, when you come to grips that what you're doing is not working, right? Meaning that you have the vision, you have this is an amazing idea, right? And you realize that at the end of the day, there is not going to be enough money to really give you the return on investment. It's not going to be enough money. I watched this movie with my daughter, Tick Boom, Tick Boom. Yeah. And, and he was turning 30 and it was like this major chasm going on in his mind of, oh my gosh, my friend just became went to work for an advertising agency and I am still trying to write plays that have not been sponsored yet. And, you can get to that point. And as a creative, when do you know that what you're pouring your heart out to, your soul into, when is it no longer an effort that's worth continuing to pursue?
I think that is a very personal question that each person has to decide for themselves. And it's one of the things I love about creatives is they can say, I know this isn't going the way I want it to. I know that this is me putting more in than I'm getting back out, but I can't not do it. And I go, great, let's make this as easy as possible then, because who knows, there are a lot of people who didn't see the results until very late in life. Some, unfortunately, not until after they were dead, right? There's a lot of famous artists that didn't get famous in time. So if you're approaching this from, this is the work that I want to do in the world, and I need to find a way to make it work, great. It doesn't mean that I can help you bring in the money that you want to bring in order to leave a very comfortable lifestyle. But if that's the trade-off that you are okay with as a creator, then, I'm here to support that as well. So I definitely will call people out if I'm like, this is, you're spending more than you're making is no good. Like, let's find ways to either broaden what you're doing in some way. But again, some people feel very particular about the purity of their art. I think it's less so that way. What's one of the things that I really appreciate about millennials is they seem to really bring together this idea of commercially viable and artistic. It wasn't an either or anymore. So they kind of crushed some of the starving artist myth. But, I think it's up to every person to decide, but it really does help to have someone to bounce that question off of so that you can hear yourself answer, someone a little sort of remind you of what you said 6 months ago, as opposed to whatever you're feeling today, whether it's a very, very high point or a very, very low point.
Love it. And, I'm curious, and because I know you work for a lot of creatives, where does it go wrong in the creative venture and creative business?
Same place it goes wrong everywhere else. People think this work is not important. It's not important for me to track my numbers. It's not important for me to stay organized, as opposed to it's not my favorite thing to do. And, not only do you really need it for the government reporting that we have to do whether we want to or not, but it's like not reading the book, right? It's reading the back of the book and saying, well, it's not important for me to read the details. There's so much information in there that you're not accessing or using. So, and I think mindset really can get in the way. I don't think that's particular to creatives, but I think they're more comfortable talking about it. And shameless plug for your book, it's one of the things that I really appreciate about your Profit First book above Mike's is it comes from a different perspective. To me, it has much more of the mindset work in there. And I think it appeals to a lot more of the people that I work with, since, none of them are 30-year-old white men who are starting, doing a startup, right? Like that's not really I can work with those people, I have, but those aren't the people that gravitate towards me. And so having a book that says I'm the first in my family to do whatever it is, or changing the way that I think about money is really challenging to my family culture, certainly resonated with me. And I think it resonates with a lot of my clients.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And, it's always interesting, because Mike, he's got a legend. His book is a legend. It's always easier to do the sequel. It's always easier to do the sequel. One of the things that I wanted to just kind of bring out to you, and us, we like to go back and forth for conversation is, I think in every profession now, it's going to take some creativity in terms of really being able to present your business. And I love that comment that you made, Anne, about, how the millennials have really embraced, that you can have art and still make money. Because, I could get up there and in a stodgy suit, you know what I mean? And I don't know how I could be a 30-year-old white male, but and do a presentation.
Or would you want to be really?
Or do when I was younger, I thought, you got to wear the suit, you got to not stand out, right? That's because we didn't really embrace the differences that we had, and it's interesting because in order to really stand out, I like Mike's book, Get Different, right? You will not get different standing up there in a suit holding up financial statements, right? And so it's going to take merging the talents, right? It's bringing in somebody that is artistic to help you change your image or to communicate the message that you want. So that I think that artistic, as a creative, there's never been a better opportunity to partner with somebody that's not a creative, you know what I mean? And help them be their best. So lots of opportunities with that and, finding that niche and finding other ways, right, to fund those different projects that you might be in. So very, very great thing from that standpoint too. Very exciting things.
And I think that book Get Different is really useful. And I love some of the, Story Brand is another big, important book when you're talking about branding and standing out. And, I think you've heard my personal story before, but so I've been bookkeeping for maybe 30 years now, almost 30 years.
She looks so young, doesn't she? You guys are watching on YouTube.
I'm turning 52 this year.
You look great.
So, the first decade, at least of that, I didn't want to tell anyone that I'd had a personal bankruptcy because I thought, who's going to trust a bookkeeper who couldn't even manage her own money? And some of it is the further I got away from that, the more comfortable I was. But the moment that I was able to start saying, I know it's a skill that can be learned because I learned it, because I started from no idea what I'm doing, complete financial illiteracy to the point of bankruptcy, not able to see any of the flying yellow, red, flashing light flags going on, to owning a very balanced bookkeeping business with happy employees, et cetera. And that willingness to be different, to be the accountant that, the bankrupt bookkeeper, again, just really let people be like, I felt so much more comfortable coming to you and talking to you, knowing that you wouldn't judge me. And I'm like, oh yeah, no judgment here. Mm-mm.
You learned the lessons, right? You can keep them from learning the lessons the hard way. So definitely that can be amazing from that standpoint. And you bring up another good, interesting point. I remember having a conversation actually with a client of ours a week ago, and she's not necessarily a creative, but she has a daycare center. And I think that to work with children, you have to have some type of creativity in it. And I remember when I first started working with her, she was watching all the other entrepreneurs, and she was like, oh my gosh, they know their financials. They know what these things mean. It's just paper with words on it to me. And I remember meeting with her last week, and she's like, oh my gosh, last month was a bad month. I had a loss. And I was like, did you just say that? Did you just say that? Oh my gosh, you just said that. And you course corrected. Now we have the opportunity to course correct from a bad month where inflation has caught up with you. And I was like, there's nothing like learning to understand your books. Yes, you want to be empowered. You want to be around people that are pushing you forward. But to learn to understand your books, to learn to absorb, there's nothing like that at the end of the day.
I totally agree. For me, that is the way to empowerment, right? And then you can delegate from a place of empowerment because you know what's happening and what it should look like at the other end, so that if it doesn't give you the expected result, you can be like, oh, something feels off here. Can you go back and check blah, blah, blah until you have the answer that you need?
I love it. And so, Ian, in terms of making things easier for our creatives to become more profitable, if you could leave them with a piece of advice, personal or business, what would that advice be?
It's not as scary as you think. Just take the baby step, 1% of your income into a profit savings account while you think about if you want to do anything else.
I love it. So start with that 1% and make that baby step. And a year from now, you'll look back and your life will be different. Thank you, Anne, so much for joining us today. It has been very enriching. We learned a lot, especially with creatives, for our audience out there that may be a creative. Lots of juicy morsels with that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure.